One of the most intimidating steps to building your own Robby is knowing that someday you're going to have to make that dome. I'm going to tell you exactly how I did it. When I first started building my 3D printed Robby, I didn't think about the dome. I think it was just a challenge that I put in the back of my mind and was worried about so many other things that I had to figure out and still have to figure out. But I was, looking at models and things I had, trying to figure out how the dome worked. If you look at things like this is the X Plus model, and on this model, the dome is cut in the back and it's cut around the front. That was kind of complicated. Many toys, like years later when the Walmart toy came out, here's a dome that's goes around the entire base, the entire spot there. It wasn't until I went to see the original Robby when he was up for auction that I saw that it was kind of a hybrid of the two. The dome actually is cut, but it does come down further along the back, and in some in probably the earliest Robby dome, where the fins are along the back here, the dome actually has these little scallop cut. But in later versions of Robby, the dome probably broke. They had to fix it. It was just that detail was missing. It was just a straight cut across there. But let's get to the crux of the thing. How the heck do you make this thing? And reading a lot online, talking to various people, it seems that a buck was made in the shape of Robby's head, and some type of plastic was heated up and pulled down over the top. That seemed the way to go. Some testing was going to be in order, and what type of plastic. Some people said, oh, it's got to be vacuum formed, and so I was debating building my own giant vacuum form machine. The first thing I did was a very simple test. What I did was I designed a mold to basically be I guess almost to the scale of the X Plus model here, but I didn't have that particularly in mind. And the idea of this little mold was I would put the two halves together, fill them up with some kind of plaster. In this case, I use this cast all or perfect cast casting material. Fill this up, get my buck or my plug, and try and stretch some plastic over the top and see what happens. So you can see this is a little dirty. You can guess that in fact I did fill this up with that casting material. I separated the two halves. I had this piece. I made a holder to just put a piece of plastic between these two pieces of wood. I heated that plastic up with a halogen lamp, pulled it down over the top of the plug, and spoiler alert, it worked. I mean, it worked better than I possibly could have imagined. So what was the next step? Of course, build the full size mold and plug and everything, right? Of course. It was a little bit more difficult than I initially thought. One thing I did realize from this test was that I was not going to need a vacuum former, because obviously the size of the shape, it's getting larger as it goes down. So you're stretching the plastic out. There's no detailed spaces where you need air to suction to sort of to pull it in more quickly. One other thing I noticed in this model that was going to be an issue later on, it's very thin because you're stretching this plastic down. It's very thick on the top, and as you stretch the sides down, it gets progressively thinner. So that was something I was going to have to keep in mind as well. Okay, let's see how I can give you an idea of the scale of this here. So, well, here we are. This was the mold that I made, and you could see inside that I clearly printed it in a number of sections, and your dome is only going to be as smooth as as the inside of this. So a ton of finishing work on this, filling in the little gaps, um, you know, spraying it with a little release agent, but I'll get to that also in a few minutes. Uh, yeah, it was a big project. I can't tell you exactly how many hours, but honestly, if I had to go by memory, I'm sure it was probably on the order of almost, um, 100 hours, by per half of the dome. And I have a gigantic printer, but I was always a little bit nervous about having a failure during the print. Good news is you don't have to finish. You don't have to finish this side. I printed this mold, and then something else occurred to me, though. This thing was going to be super heavy if I filled it up with, if I filled this thing up with plaster. I was not going to be able to lift this thing. So the other thing I did was I scaled down the file that I was using for the plug to make this mold, and I scaled it down so that maybe it came with, when you nested it in here, it came within, let's say, 2 or 3 inches. The idea being I would pour my plaster in between this inner lining and this outer lining, and I'd get something strong enough to not fall apart when I picked it up, but light enough that I would be able to pick it up. So that was suspended by a couple of boards I put across the top when I poured it. The other thing that I noticed that you might see here is, I made these little fins on the bottom for balancing, these little fins here, so that the thing could stand up by itself. And not thinking, like, were those fins going to be strong enough? I mean, I should have made them come out farther for stability. They were printed thicker than, well, that's not really true. They were only thicker here because they're doubled up on the bottom, because I printed this in quarters essentially. So that was a little bit of a source of concern when I filled this up. Was it just gonna fall over under its own weight? Because obviously it's top heavier because it gets wider as it goes up. But it worked. One other item, so I had never done any mold making, and certainly nothing at this scale or size before. So I was doing a lot of reading online, and a lot of people recommended that I cast the plug using something called UltraCal, which is from the company USG, UltraCal 30 specifically. And no one near me sold UltraCal 30. Home Depot, Lowe's, the regular big box stores, the independent hardware stores. I found someone online who would sell. I found a few people online, but you can imagine you're buying probably a 30 or a 40-pound bag. What does that cost to ship? God bless the U.S. Post Office with their priority flat rate, no matter what the weight, mailing containers is. I found a store, and the guy said, whatever, $20 flat rate shipping. And at my door showed up 2 of those USPS boxes where he had somehow crammed those bags of UltraCal into the box. And just before I show you the dome, the other thing that I bought 2 bags. I thought, okay, that's going to be fine. That'll be enough. It's never enough, right? So I was pouring the dome. I got within 2 inches of the top of the dome, and I ran out of the UltraCal material. And at this point, 2 bags, waiting, a couple of weeks for it to get here, or however long, and all the pent-up anticipation, and it's curing. That's it. I went again back online, and some people had directions for how to, with the materials that you can get at Home Depot, basically combine plaster and cement in certain quantities to get something that is like UltraCal. And so I ran out while the stuff was curing, did the mix, and poured in the last 2 inches. I realized it wasn't going to be critical as long as it adhered the quality of the material at the last 2 inches, because on the back I was pulling the dome all the way down to somewhere around here because I knew I was going to cut it. So in the back, you're cutting it higher because of the fins, and in the front you're cutting it higher because of the neon. So it really only comes down to that sort of crucial point near the bottom, even here, on the sides, and it's cut even a little bit there, sort of like to the height of the lowest fin on the original Robby. So that was another little wrinkle and a gamble that luckily paid off. Here we are in my garage, my friend Mark and I, in a cold December. This is my second attempt making a dome. I tried making one myself previously. It was a disaster. I realized you need two people to sort of take the frame and uniformly, push it down over the buck. What happened here was we weren't paying attention. I wasn't paying attention for a few seconds, and look how much I let that thing over melt. What happens is once it starts to sag in the middle, then it gets closer to the heat, and all of a sudden, exponentially, it starts to droop a lot more. So I wasn't monitoring the pressure closely enough, and that's what happened. We decided to try and make the dome for the experience anyway, but really I let that plastic sag way too much. You want a temperature of about 325 degrees. You can kind of tap it with your finger and see when it's getting soft and ready to pull. And as I said, in this case, the failure was on my part. I let it get too hot. So next we decided to do a third attempt, and let's see how that went. I'll let Mark talk a little bit about our first attempt, and then I'll come in and talk about some other Robby dome techniques.
Okay, it's December 31st, 2021. We're over here at Mike's house. This is our second attempt tonight at making a Robby dome.
I was not going to discuss the first attempt.
We had covered it up. This time we're not covering it. We're just letting you can see the red glow. That is the heaters underneath that are heating up. And when it's going down to about half of the distance between the surface here and the heaters, we're going to, about right here, we're going to lift this metal frame and push it out. In fact, Mike, you want to move that temperature thing?
Yes. We don't want to make a copy of that. So it's about 292. So we want it to get around like 320, 325.
Okay. We're about halfway down to the half. So we're probably about a quarter of the way down. If I'm eyeballing that correctly. Yeah. I'm not going to touch it.
300.
I'm going down to about there. It's about an inch below my finger. So the last one we did, we covered it up and it got too deep, and you probably saw the other video where it just kind of all wrinkled. And we're trying to avoid.
We're never going to show the other video.
I'm sorry. We want to avoid the wrinkles and the bubbles. But we actually did get it on the last one. We got it all the way down to here, which is what we wanted to have it do. And so we're hoping to,
this will
end the year with a dome, a usable Robby dome.
That's the keyword, being usable. Okay, so some tiny little flecks there, which could just be dust that we didn't see. Like I wonder, instead of just vacuuming it off, I wonder if, I'm going to narrate over attempt number 3 here for a few minutes. One of the things in my research that I noticed is in the 2 previous attempts that I'm aware of people to mass produce or do a small run of Robby domes, in both cases, the domes were vacuum formed, and in both cases, the buck or the plug here that you see on the table there, what was done is that it was basically inverted. The plastic was heated up underneath it, and the plug was basically, you use the weight of the plug itself and the natural sort of shape of the droop or the sagging, if you will, to basically lower the plug into that, plus with the vacuum forming. And the results, again, in the 2 cases that I've seen, the results were fantastic. Of course, that relies on you having a giant industrial-sized vacuum form machine. It relies on you having some kind of mechanical way to invert that plug, to mount it vertically, and to lower it down. I think the original plug from the original, Robby the Robot was made of wood. In the 2 cases I've seen, it was made of some kind of, plaster, ultracal, something like I use. But that plug that's sitting there, that even with the hollowing on the inside, that weighed a few hundred pounds. And I was really concerned that if I mounted some kind of screws or some kind of plate inside of it, that that it was going to, break if I lowered it and collapse on the floor. So I decided to stick with this method of stretching the plastic over the top. Technically, kind of above where we want to be. Like, I mean, we could I'd almost say we try pulling it.
You're still 6 inches above, I think.
336, 337, but we're getting in the area where it might be too hot to, I'm gonna put my hand on it. 320 is sort of the range we want to be in, and we're on the edges, we're close, we're like at 300. It'd be nice to have it up to like 315-ish or so, but we're like 290, 300. See here, we're in the middle. I'm gonna say, Mark, 335. I know I said let's let it get down to the bottom, but
you want to do it, huh?
I think so. I don't want it to droop too much. Okay.
You ready?
Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Against the wall?
Yep. Down we go. Now is when it gets difficult.
Doing it. You're gonna make it. Oh, baby.
Oh, nice. Hold it. Now, unfortunately, now you might make the argument that we need a vacuum. We'll see.
Oh, because it's wide around the bottom?
But we have a little bit of, we do have a little bit of playroom.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that might be it, Mark. I got a couple little marks. I could see a couple little fleck marks, but part of it will be painted.
Now, see, now I don't know about you, but I'm not seeing that this side is against your...
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, we can actually try and push it in a little, but I don't think that...
It's too warm now, or too cool.
Yeah.
I think we could have gone longer temperature, made it softer.
Well, it would have, if it's softer, it will only exacerbate this problem where it comes out at the bottom like this.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
But that's...
Definitely.
I'm all the way down on my side.
Or if I had a ring that slide over the top to pull it in,
Yep.
as opposed to making a vacuum.
Like a barrel ring. But I think that you'd have to have a really strong vacuum to suck that in.
Yeah.
Because we were struggling to push it down.
It might be enough. It's going to be close. It's a little bit wavy here, possibly also because I pushed it, but if it can't be, it might be close. Oh, let me turn the heater off. Well, I'm going to call that, let me turn off my camera. But I'm going to call that a success. But to your point about this, yeah, look, so here.
And here we have Mike trying the dickens to get the was the plug, not the plug,
The buck or the plug, yeah.
the butt out of the...
It'll happen. We've done it once before.
We raised it up with these 2x4s here. Oh,
hey!
There it is.
Oh,
we got the video. Oh, the big reveal. Look at this. Hang on. This will... Nice.
Still some little spots in there.
Oh, he looks good, doesn't he?
Welcome to Altair 5, gentlemen. 4, 6, whoa. It's very acoustic in here.
It is. It's like this cone of silence, huh? What? Can't hear you, Mike.
All right.
Well, hey, look at that.
Look at that.
Look at this.
Awesome.
Want to be one of the first to see the robot dome?
Yeah, look at that.
Check
now
it
we have
out.
to take it off. So now, but there are still some little spots. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good.
No wrinkles?
It's pretty good. There's a few little specks, but it's pretty good.
Yeah. All right. Now we take it out of the frame.
And there's the untrimmed dome installed on top of Robby. As to the type of plastic that I used, I found my old shipping receipt here from a gentleman on eBay. It was a sheet of clear PETG plastic, 1/4 inch thick by 24 inches by 24 inches. 4 sheets at the time. I didn't make 4 domes. I think this is I bought these for a second attempt that I haven't done yet. 4 sheets were $137, $36 shipping, $11 tax, grand total of $184. So roughly, raw material wise, roughly $50 a dome. If you can get perfect yield, which I did not. It took me 3 attempts to get that dome back there. So the first one Give or take. The first dome cost about $150, but I was hoping to make a couple spares when it's a little bit warmer in the garage. So if you have been holding off building a Robby because you're worried about the dome, I hope this shows you that it can be done. It's totally possible. It's not a lot of work. It was a fun process. You do need a little bit of help, pulling that plastic down once it's heated up. And of course, be careful. It's hot and flames and all the other stuff. Not good. Do not set the house on fire making Robby. But it's possible. And if you try it, I'd love to hear the results. Please share in the comments. And I wish you all the luck building your own Robby the Robot.